Armenians in Turkey, one of the indigenous peoples of Turkey, have an estimated population of 50,000 to 70,000, down from 2 million in 1914. Today, the overwhelming majority of Turkish Armenians are concentrated in Istanbul. They support their own newspapers and schools, and the majority belong to the Armenian Apostolic faith. Until the Armenian Genocide of 1915, most of the Armenian population of Turkey lived in the eastern parts of the country that Armenians call Western Armenia. History. Armenians presently living in Turkey are a remnant of what was once a much larger community that existed for thousands of years, long before the establishment of the Sultanate of Rum. Estimates for the number of Armenian citizens of the Ottoman Empire in the decade before World War I ranged between 1.3 to 2 million. When Constantinople finally became part of the Ottoman Empire, financial support was given to the Apostolic Church by the Sultan, so it could build churches in the city, which prior to that the Byzantines refused as they viewed the church as heretical. Armenians in the Ottoman Empire were viewed as a separate millet, and given the status of second-class citizens, but were generally treated well until well into the empire's existence regardless. Many Armenians gained significant positions in the empire in professions such as banking, which they almost had a monopoly in, with 32/37 bankers being Armenian, and the oldest still running Turkish company Zildjian was founded by an Armenian. Starting in the late 19th century, political instability, dire economic conditions, and continuing ethnic tensions prompted the emigration of as many as 100,000 Armenians to Europe, the Americas and the Middle East. This massive exodus from the Ottoman Empire is what started the modern Armenian diaspora worldwide. There was conflict between Armenians and Turks between 1892 and 1915. The Armenian Genocide followed in 1915–1916 until 1918, during which the Ottoman government of the time ordered the deportation and killing of 0.9 to 1.2 million Armenians because of alleged political and security considerations. These measures affected a huge majority of Armenians, an estimated 75% to 80% of all the Armenians living in the Ottoman Empire during World War I. Many died directly through Ottoman massacres, while others died as a result of dehydration, disease, and starvation during the death marches and in the Syrian desert, and even more due to Kurdish raids on fleeing refugees and on Armenians in the death marches. As for the remaining Armenians in the eastern parts of the country, they found refuge by 1917–1918 in the Caucasus and within the areas controlled by the newly established Democratic Republic of Armenia. They never returned to their original homes in eastern Turkey. An estimated 300,000 Armenians were adopted by Turks and Kurds or married into Muslim populations in a process of Turkification and Kurdification to avoid facing a similar fate. Their descendants are known as hidden Armenians and are present throughout Western Armenia, but particularly in Dasim, which witnessed mass conversions. All those who survived the death camps in deportations to Deir ez-Zor ended up there as well. Armenians deported from areas that were under Allied control by 1918, particularly the short-lived French Mandate, which had control of southeastern Turkey and all of Cilicia according to the Sykes-Picot Agreement, were able to return to their homes to gather things or search for loved ones. After the fall of French Cilicia, some of those returnees attempted to stay permanently after the Turks gained the territory back, but were all driven away by the early 1930s due to various reasons. Those who left the Mandate ended up in Syria, France, Armenia, the Americas and the rest of Europe, in that order. The Armenian population suffered a final blow with ongoing massacres and atrocities throughout the period 1920 to 1923. During the Turkish War of Independence, Those suffering the most were those Armenians remaining in the east and the south of the country, and the Pontic Greeks in the Black Sea region. By the end of the 1920s, only a sprinkling of non-converted Armenians were left in Turkey, scattered sparsely throughout the country, with the only viable Armenian population remaining in Istanbul and its environs. At the time of the establishment of the Republic of Turkey, Hatay province was part of Syria, and is why that area still has some established and officially recognized Armenian communities. Demographics. Due to events in Turkey during the last century, Turkish Armenians were killed, forced into hiding, and forcibly converted to Islam, which therefore split them into different groups. There are three groups: Armenian Christians, Crypto-Armenians, and Muslim Armenians. Christian Armenians are in most cases part of the recognized minority, but can also include Crypto-Armenians who are not legally recognized as Armenian but identify as both Armenian and Christian, and Armenian immigrants to Turkey. Crypto-Armenians are Armenians who are legally identified as Turks and are either Christian and openly recognize their identity, hide their identity, and either practice crypto-Christianity or Islam, openly identify as Armenian but are Muslim, or don't know about their ethnicity at all. The combined total of all Armenians in Turkey is unknown, because the amount of people who are Crypto-Armenian is hard to determine, with numbers ranging from as low as 30,000 to several million depending on how broad the standards were to be considered Crypto-Armenian in the studies made. However, the combined total of immigrant Armenians and those in the recognized minority would be estimated at 150–170,000. Another statistic could be the amount of people who are members of the Armenian Patriarchate of Constantinople, being at 95,000. Armenian Christians. The officially recognized Armenian Christian population is estimated to be between 50,000 and 70,000, mostly living in Istanbul and its environs. They are almost always members of the Armenian Apostolic, Armenian Catholic or Armenian Evangelical churches. The number of Armenian Christians is both diminishing due to emigration to Europe, the Americas and Australia, and increasing due to immigrants from Armenia looking for work, and Crypto-Armenians who decide to identify openly as Armenians and convert to Christianity. However, most of that growth is not reflected in official data, because Crypto-Armenians are not listed as part of the recognized Armenian minority due to Turkish laws on the officially recognized minorities, which doesn't allow newly identified Armenians to change their Turkish identities they were given at birth. As for Armenian immigrants, most are unable to join the minority because they are illegal immigrants. Due to those factors, the de jure number of Armenian Christians is much lower than the de facto amount. The Armenian minority is recognized as a separate millet in the Turkish system and has its own religious, cultural, social and educational institutions along with a distinct media. The Turkish Armenian community struggles to keep its own institutions, media and schools open due to diminishing demand from emigration and quite considerable economic sacrifices. Regions with Armenian Christians. Istanbul. The Armenian community of Istanbul is the largest in Turkey, a catalyst being due to the fact that it was the only place that Armenian Christians were at least somewhat protected at the time of the creation of Turkey post-Armenian genocide. Other factors included the Patriarchate having its headquarters in the city, and the city's economy and quality of life attracting Armenian immigrants, which allowed for the community to keep stable numbers in the face of discrimination and constant migration. Unlike the Greek community, which by comparison had far less or no immigration and now has only 2–3,000, mostly elderly members. Regardless of the fact it had far more members than the Armenian community starting in 1924. Some of the most important areas for Armenians in Istanbul are the Pangulti and Kumkapi districts, Kumkapi has the Patriarchate, and is known for its many fish restaurants and historic churches. One of the main differences between the districts is that Kumkapi is apostolic, while Pangulti has a mix of Armenian and Roman Catholic. Kumkapi is also located in the Old City, while Pangulti is in the newer part. Hatay Province Iskenderun has one small Armenian church, and a community of a few dozen Armenians. Vakiflekhoyu is the only remaining fully ethnic Armenian village in Turkey. This village and 6 others managed to brave past the Armenian genocide in the Musa defense. This particular village only exists as of now due to some of the population deciding to stay after Hatay province was invaded and annexed by Turkey in 1939, while the other 6 villages' populations decided to leave. It is located on the slopes of Musadar in the Samandaj district of Hatay province. The village overlooks the Mediterranean Sea and is within eyesight of the Syrian border. It is home to a community of about 130 Turkish Armenians, and around 300 people who are from the village who come back to visit during the summer. Diyarbakir Province Diyarbakir has 3 operating Armenian churches as of 2015, 1 Apostolic, 1 Catholic, and 1 Protestant, the largest amount for any city in Turkey excluding Istanbul. The city's a modern Armenian community was established in the 1920s and 30s when all the Armenians that still lived in the surrounding areas consolidated by moving to Amida, forming a community consisting of 30 families as of the 1980s. It could also be assumed that many crypto-Armenians have been living here as well, because when the Apostolic Church was restored in 2011 after years of abandonment, several thousand people came to celebrate Mass there. Based on that, because the conditions are changing for Armenians in Amida, a much larger Armenian Christian community could potentially come into being if the crypto-Armenian population start revealing their identities. Many already have, with several baptisms being done as a show of their new Christian and Armenian identities. The success of the Armenian community here as a whole is largely thanks to the Kurdish HDP party mayor, who has publicly apologized for Kurdistan's role in the Armenian genocide, and has even went as far as building a genocide memorial in the city. Other places, both identified and officially recognized Armenians elsewhere, are spread thinly throughout the eastern and central parts of the country, in tiny communities such as in Melita, Shivas, Van, Kayseri, Elazığ, and Muse. Many of these communities are so tiny that there isn't even a single church to accommodate them. In some cases the community is large enough, but the leadership of the city makes it so it's impossible to have one, such as in Melita. The number of Armenian Christians have risen significantly in these parts of the country, particularly in cities like Van, Muse, and Shivas, where the communities are new and entirely crypto in origin. However, these new communities of entirely crypto origin are not legally identified as Armenians, so therefore can't even attempt to get Armenian services like churches and schools, regardless of identifying openly as Armenians. However, many of them have been living as cryptos for years, and have built inconspicuous places of worship in the countryside, such as rock churches. Immigration from Armenia. The Christian Armenian presence in Turkey is reinforced by a constant flow of mostly illegal immigrants from Armenia who settle in Turkey in search of better job opportunities, where the difference in pay can be quite significant. Despite a negative public opinion in Armenia of an Armenian who works for a Turk, as a result of the century-long uneasy relationship between the two countries. By 2010, there were between 22,000 and 25,000 Armenian citizens living illegally in Istanbul alone, according to Turkish officials. and an estimated total amount of 100,000. Many of them are employed in Turkish households to provide domestic services, such as cooking and cleaning. According to a 2009 interview poll of 150 Armenian work migrants, the majority are women. In 2010, amid Armenia's push for the recognition of the 1915 events as genocide, Prime Minister Erdogan threatened to deport the illegal immigrants back to Armenia. However, the situation gradually thawed. Some Armenian immigrants do not discuss ever returning to their homeland, having adapted to life in Turkey. Beginning in 2011, children of the Armenian citizens living illegally in Istanbul have been allowed to attend local Armenian minority schools. But as they are not Turkish citizens, they do not receive diplomas at the end of the school term. Muslim Armenians Hemshans also in Turkey are the Hopper Hemshunli, are Sunni Muslims of Armenian origin and culture who converted to Islam during Ottoman and earlier rule, and mostly live in the Hopper and Borca counties of Turkey's Artvin province. In addition to Turkish, they speak a dialect of Western Armenian they call Homshetsma, or Hemsans, in Turkish. Other Armenians, Crypto-Armenians, Hidden Armenians or Crypto-Armenians is an umbrella term to describe people in Turkey, of full or partial ethnic Armenian origin who generally conceal their Armenian identity from wider Turkish society. They are descendants of Armenians in Turkey who were Islamized and either Kurdified or Turkified under the threat of either death, displacement, loss of property or a combination of those during the Armenian genocide. Ways in which they were converted included orphans being taken in by Muslim families, Armenian women being taken as wives by soldiers, and entire families converting by joining communities that accepted them. The latter option is said to have happened en masse in the province of Dasim. Many cryptos are totally unaware of their Armenian ethnicity, living as Turks or Kurds, while many know they are Armenian but hide it out of fear of discrimination. Religious affiliation. Considering the advanced nature of crypto-Armenians, they cannot be classified as either Muslim or Christian. Some practice crypto-Christianity, masquerading as Muslims, while many genuinely practice Islam. Most cryptos who later identify as Armenians are Christian as well, with a common practice among those who confess their ethnicity being to have a Christian baptism performed. Still, some who confess do not change their religion, and continue on as Muslims. Others even practice both faiths depending on where they are. That may just be due to a lack of churches, and for identified Armenians who are Muslim, a fear of Turkish extremists.